This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 120-something. We're about to have a fist fight over what number this is. Nobody can decide.
It's 126.
So you say.
Let it be said, let it be done. It's 126.
Okay, Chris says it's 126, which is weird because I think we just published 127.
Who's in charge here?
But that's a great question. We'll leave it to the listeners. Hop on Facebook, find Haulin Assets on Facebook, and you can comment on who you think is in charge. I'm Craig, your host. Over there, he's Chris. How's it going, Chris?
Good. How you doing?
Not too bad.
It's probably Chet because he pays the bills.
I suppose that's accurate. That's true. And we do have a guest with us today, and we are going to introduce you in just a moment.
All right.
But we're gonna wait on that because, Chris, I need to remind everybody to go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com to check out all the stuff that I'm always talking about. Show notes, any documentation, especially for the financials episodes, but it's all over the place. And you can comment there. You can also do so at Facebook. You can find us at motorcarrierhq.com, which is where you find the tools and resources to help you get started on your trucking journey, or I should say your ownership journey. Let's see, what else am I forgetting? Leave a review, 5 stars, because, we're just that good. Chris, how's the week been? I saw some pictures.
Yeah, I
need to hear about these pictures.
All right. So before we get into exactly what the pictures were, I want to set this up a little bit. We had a driver that was bringing a load back from Texas. And when you going from Texas to Utah, you go typically through New Mexico into a little bit of Colorado, Cortez, Colorado, Moab, Utah, and then, just heading north. And so this driver, she's on 191 just south of Moab, which is a 2-lane road. It's got like a 70 mile an hour speed limit. So it's a fast 2-lane road. And she's driving north. Another semi truck is driving south in the other lane. And a 4-wheeler idiot decides to try to pass the other semi truck.
Wait, a 4-wheeler?
Yeah, that's what truck drivers refer to, a regular vehicle.
I gotcha.
It's got 4 wheels, Chris, instead of 18.
I grew up in Utah and Idaho, and 4-wheeler has a very specific denotation.
Not an ATV 4-wheeler.
Okay,
like
I was gonna say
what a trucker would refer to as a 4-wheeler.
Got it.
Tries to pass, and our driver realized that truck wasn't going to make it, and so she slammed on her brakes, which you obviously have to do.
Yep.
And
she was hauling
eggs.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Eggs that weren't wrapped very well, and apparently, when they're like the bulk eggs,
sure,
and they're going to a plant, so they're not they're going to be processed, so they're not
in
ready
for the grocery store cartons or something. Right.
So they're on these plastic trays, and then kind of like the regular carton trays. There's a mix of both. And the shipper decided, in all their infinite wisdom, to put the more durable, heavy-duty plastic trays on top of the stacks and the paper carton cardboard trays on the bottom. And so all these things combined made for a mess. And so go and look at the pictures on Facebook. They're pretty good. We'll have it on our Facebook page. I'll probably put it in the show notes too, but yeah, they scrambled eggs. That's one way to scramble eggs.
I've seen the pictures. It's not just the mess. You should check out the mess. It's pretty incredible, but it's also, I saw the same thing. I'm like, wait, how were those stacked?
Yeah.
Who did this?
Yeah, the stacking was not done well. So we're still kind of in the process of what's going to happen in this situation.
Yeah.
I can tell you that we've paid a $6,000 bill to have them. $5,000 of it was to have them restacked onto. They had to pull all the pallets off, restack everything. That was $5,000, and then another $1,000 in cleaning fees because the
it's all
dock
over
was a
everything.
mess. And their parking lot was a mess. The reefers have a drain in the front of the tray. Well, one on each corner of the trailer, and the low point, it all just came. There's a big puddle of yolk outside of the truck. So that's one of the pictures. So
we're laughing, Chris. Yeah. We're laughing, but only to hide the pain.
To hide the pain. Yeah. Actually, at one point, I thought the loss was going to be huge as far as the number of eggs we were losing. Based off of what you see the yolk wise, you think like the very worst.
It's an entire trailer
but
full
of there were 24 pallets on it, and we think we're only going to lose 2 pallets worth of eggs. So
all right,
not as bad as it could have been.
Still, it's a steep bill.
It is a steep bill. So as we figure out exactly what that's going to be and how it's going to shake out for us, we'll be sure to mention it on the podcast. So stay tuned.
No joke. And that sounds like one of those things where it's experience that you can only have through experience. Nobody's going to tell you when you start a trucking company, oh, hey, by the way, watch out for eggs. Nobody's going to tell you that. But now you might tell your drivers going forward, if there is a load of eggs, you say, okay, hey, by the way, this happened to us once, just heads up, extra care.
We've already taken another load of eggs since that happened. So crossing our fingers that one turns out okay. With that being said, that this whole situation, I'm not going to give any details on it now, but it may be one of those situations where when life gives you lemons,
make scrambled eggs.
Man, like in this case, I guess so. Make scrambled eggs or lemonade, or maybe you have lemonade with your scrambled eggs.
Drop.
I think we may actually we may have some positive things that come out of this situation. So as this story evolves, we will
keep us abreast.
Posted. Yep.
Okay, Chris. I will definitely be asking you more about that. But for now, today's episode is about recruiting. It's not about eggs, believe it or not. I wish it was, because this is a lot of fun to just picture in my head. But today we're talking about recruiting. Do you want to tee this up before we bring our guest in, and why this is a topic for you that you wanted to go after?
Yeah, as a small trucking company, really for any trucking company, recruiting is a tough thing. But as a small trucking company, you're trying to compete with all the big fleets out there that have recruiting departments and their own team that's all they do, 100% recruiting. And it's really hard to do. And, especially early on in our early days, before we kind of met Jake here, we'll let him introduce himself in just a second. I'm sorry.
He's not allowed to talk yet.
I couldn't think of what else to refer him to. This guy that's sitting next to me. Until we got hooked up with him, we were struggling a little bit, and he's helped us out a bunch. And so I thought it would be a good episode to have, to talk a little bit about this, of how does a small trucking company like ours compete with the big guys when it comes to recruiting without, them eating our lunch. Yeah.
Well, Jake.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce yourself? What's your name and where are you from? What company are you from? And how long you've been working with Chris?
Yeah. So name's Jake Peters, co-founder, CEO of Merrimack Solutions. We specialize right now in Facebook advertising for driver recruiting. We've been working with Chris now since, I think, around Thanksgiving last year.
Yeah. So
kind of on again, off again, as we've helped you guys hire, but we're on campaign number 4 now.
Yeah. 6 months-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I've been in the recruiting space for a little over 4 years now. And running my own company for just under 2.
All right. Well, that's a nice resume. You've got a nice trajectory going on there, Jake. That's perfect. Okay, cool. So let's talk about recruiting then, and maybe we start with a 30,000 foot view, and then we can funnel down into what it actually looks like on the ground for you guys. But tell me about what it looks like in the trucking space, turnover rates, and the length of the hiring process, and some of those details. Where do you want to start, Chris?
I would just say that one, turnover rates are really high, usually around 100%. So for any, like in trucking, that's typical, but that's a really high turnover rate.
But how do you measure that over time? 100%.
So essentially,
over how much time?
Over 1 year. If you've got 10 drivers, you're hiring 10 drivers.
Really?
You may have one that lasts a full year, or you may have one that lasts 2 years, but you'll have 2 more that last 6 months. So on average, a driver's you're filling a position once a year, every position.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's tough.
Who's your longest tenured driver, Chris? Just out of curiosity, not that
Oh man, you'd ask me that off the top of my head. I'm 90% sure it's Greg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Greg with a G.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, man. You're so close to a decent name.
Greg's a good name.
Okay. All right. So that gives me an idea of how often you're doing this. And what are some of the challenges then associated with it? I mean, we've talked a little bit about this.
Especially as you're growing, you're not only having to replace those drivers that quit, but you're also having to find new drivers for new trucks as you bring those on. And so, we've talked about, there's been a few times in the last year or so when we've had multiple trucks sitting and empty, and that's just it's not a good thing for a trucking company, especially a small one like us that's just trying to get our footing. Like, you need to have your drivers in the truck as much as possible. We've talked about that on some of our profit and loss statements, that there's a big difference in those months when we've got all of our trucks filled with drivers and running full speed. When you have one or two, one missing, you fill two, it starts to get painful.
Yeah. So Jake, tell me what is the most effective place to go, either to recruit or be recruited?
Right.
There's always, Monster or Indeed
right.
or whatever, but I think you guys do a lot of stuff on Facebook. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So one, if you're a driver, there's no best place to get recruited because you're getting recruited constantly.
There's a shortage right now, right?
So you're short. I think it's about 78,000 drivers, and it's growing. And because drivers will go to different job boards and they'll submit their information, they'll say, this is the position I'm in for. Their information gets sent out to every carrier, like Haulin Assets, or whoever wants to hire that type of driver. And they're getting phone calls constantly. So you're not even maybe looking for a job, but you're going to get a call from a recruiter who you may not ever know. But it's a position you are in theory interested in for what you sign up for with that website. Now carriers, what they'll do is they'll start, when they finally decide it's time to hire, they'll go to one of the kind of common places, which is going to be your job boards, the Monsters, the Indeeds, like you mentioned. There's truck driving specific job boards. They'll go to a third party kind of database type company. That's going to be, like I mentioned, where the third party pays for the ads to build the database of drivers. And they know what drivers are in your hiring area, what qualifications they have and in what positions they're interested in. And they match you, or they send you a shared lead. So the driver doesn't know who you are, but in theory, your job should satisfy them. Their skills should satisfy you. And it's just like a matchmaking service.
Sure. I'm trying to put myself in both your shoes, Chris, as an owner of a fleet, and as in the shoes of a driver. And when you're talking about a nationwide shortage of 78,000 drivers, give or take, that's huge, for an industry like this. That's a huge shortage. That makes it an employee's market, right? It's way tougher for you as an employer to find the right person and keep the right person than it is for them to say, hey, the grass is going to be greener over there. I'll just go check them out. That's why you're talking about 100% turnover rates, right?
And if you've got 2 years of driving experience and you've got a clean, at least a fairly clean driving record, you can find a job.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
If you guys don't mind me asking you, I don't think this is actually in the notes, or maybe it is, and I just can't remember, but it's a question that's going to be on a lot of people's minds. I hear there's 78,000 driver jobs open out there. Gosh, it's really easy to go get one. As soon as you get your CDL, you're snatched up and you're good to go. But as a long-term career path, a lot of people are going to be nervous about AI and driverless cars and all that stuff. Should they be? Should somebody consider this as a long-term career solution, driving and eventually owning and operating?
That's a good question. And I think the whole AI and self-driving vehicles, especially on the commercial side of vehicles, is a long ways out.
Yeah.
If you're 20, you may not get a full 20-year career out of that, but I think anybody else, I think there's still plenty of time. And I don't ever see in my lifetime, or at least in my career, where that's going to get to the point where no humans are needed. I think there's going to be humans needed in a seat, whether it's just for the last mile, getting off the freeway, that kind of thing. There's going to be a need for it. So I wouldn't be afraid to jump into the industry, but that's kind of part of the problem with the recruiting thing. The younger folks just aren't wanting to drive trucks. And so the average age of a truck driver, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like surprisingly high, like around 50.
Yeah, I think it's like 55.
55. Yeah, that's nuts. I mean, that's for a lot of people, that's 10 years away from retirement. That's the average age.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a changing industry, and it's probably why AI is becoming a thing, or why they want it to, because they're like, hey, nobody wants to drive.
Yeah.
But this isn't a podcast about macroeconomics. It's this is a podcast about how to go about the recruiting business.
Right.
Now, Jake, you guys do a lot of stuff on Facebook. I assume partly because, like you just said, average age 55. What's the website people are going to spend most time on? Facebook. Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
So gosh, I'm struggling to think of where we should start with this conversation.
Let's talk about some of the statistics with Facebook
Sure.
and like where, drivers are. And that's why, like, one of the things that was really eye-opening for me is, okay, Facebook as a recruiting tool makes a lot of sense, because I'll maybe let you take it from there, Jake, and talk about some of the statistics.
Yeah. So more than 96% of drivers are going to have a Facebook account. And this isn't driver specific, but the average Facebook user is on the platform for 33 plus minutes a day.
30 minutes a day. Okay.
Yeah. And so, but if you put yourself in the seat of a driver and you think these people are away from their home, they miss their family and friends, Facebook is an awesome place for them to stay connected a little bit and stay connected with other drivers on the road. And when you're thinking of platforms to recruit on, kind of like you're asking earlier, Facebook is without a doubt the number one platform for audience size and engagement. And with this little ad budget, you can reach 96% of the possible drivers in your hiring area, and get feedback on your job offer, get feedback on if these are people are interested, and get people inquiring about your open positions.
Yeah.
More so than waiting for someone to come find you.
So how do you go about the process then of building a Facebook campaign? Is this are you treating Facebook like a job board and people need to go find the page, drivers wanted today, .facebook.com or whatever? How does Facebook work then? Are you building social pages, group pages where people can talk about it?
I'll let Jake answer that question in a second. But one of the things that I found really interesting, one of the statistics that Jake shared with me, of why another reason that Facebook makes a whole lot of sense is 73% of the people looking for a job have found their last job through social media.
73%.
73%.
Wow, that's pretty good.
And that's one thing too, that's really popular with the young people. And people hear Facebook campaign and they don't realize that includes Instagram. So you're hitting the 55-year-old, drivers on Facebook, but then the young people that are coming in, it's just as simple to hit them on Instagram through your Facebook campaign. So you can really hit every demographic of driver that you want to hire
through a Facebook campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. What, how old is the youngest driver you've recruited, Jake? What do you think? Do you remember? Are we talking
early
20s?
I mean,
21, you have to be at least 21.
Right.
So that's probably.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I don't know the exact age. Because we can't, because of Facebook's restrictions, I can't ask somebody their age. And we can jump into kind of the nitty gritty side. That's kind of into the checklist or the to-do list of questions I have outlined to show people how to begin Facebook advertising for their own carrier and their own recruiting. But to get long story short, Facebook won't let me ask somebody their age.
Right. I was just curious. There's a lot of, when it comes to hiring and recruiting, take it from me, everybody, go get a good lawyer to tell you all about the laws you need to comply with, because you can run afoul of them really quickly. Right, Chris?
Yep.
You know that better than I do. So, it's a minefield out there, everybody. So, let me ask you then about your guys' relationship and how this started. Chris, you're drawn to the idea of doing some Facebook campaigns. How do you then, Jake, go about doing that? And, like I said, are you DMing these people, direct messages? Are you creating posts on existing pages? Are you creating pages and trying to make an audience for them? How does this actually work then?
So the first step is I met with Chris and the Haulin Assets team, learn exactly what type of driver is it that they need, grab any photos of their trucks that they're using, grab their assets from their marketings. We're going to use their brand. From there, we're compiling a set of ads that we're going to run paid advertising campaigns through. So there are a bunch of Facebook groups that you can go in and direct message and sort of guerrilla market your way to getting interest. But the way we run things is this is a paid advertising campaign, and we're actually going to hit the people that, maybe don't even realize they want a Facebook job, but they're scrolling through their timeline and the Haulin Assets ad pops up and they're like, man, like these guys have great home time. It's good pay, new trucks. Like I didn't even realize I wanted a job, but I want to talk to Chris.
Right.
So it's more paid ads and getting people that are maybe passive seekers.
Got it. Okay. So instead of, like you say, guerrilla marketing, for people unfamiliar, that would be like what I was talking about.
Right.
You go create a page to you make a community around trucking memes or whatever, and then use that to leverage your community to find candidates, right? What you're talking about is more direct, where you can create you pay Facebook X number of dollars, and then they serve up ads to anybody who is interested in trucking, works in trucking, whatever. They know. Sorry, everybody, they know you.
They know everything.
And that's kind of one of the cool things about Facebook is you can make it really targeting. Like Facebook usually knows if somebody either has an interest in trucking or is a truck driver. They know you can advertise based on a demographic area. So like we've said, we want to do our ads in Utah and Idaho. And you can even get it by, I think, zip code
so with employment, it gets a little different. The smallest you can go is a 15-mile radius around any pin drop. So you can't say zip code, but you can say
pin drop.
Yeah.
So it's still within 15 miles of an area. So you can get pretty close to where you want to advertise. And that's pretty cool.
Okay. So that's how you're going out and finding these people. Or I mean, that's the start of it, right? But if you want to do that, or if somebody listening wants to do something like that, they want to start a paid advertising campaign to find drivers, what do they need to have? Obviously, you've got a Facebook account, but where do you go from there?
Right. So the first thing you're going to want to do is first analyze where are we getting leads from? Because I imagine you guys had interest before Merrimack came along and had Facebook ads. And so you just want to know, okay, do we have a strong referral campaign? Don't want to overstep in any or over recruit in any area, or a referral campaign and a Facebook campaign can actually create a type of synergy where the driver recommends your company to a fellow driver. That new person who's not your current employee checks their phone that night. We've all had this happen, right? Where Facebook shows you an ad for something you didn't even realize you had.
Yeah. Now you're getting into, it gets freaky.
Yes.
Right. I told my wife, I was like, someday I think we should go vacation in Norway. Guess what I got that night? A whole bunch of Facebook ads about vacationing in Norway.
Right. Yeah. So now imagine you're a driver and you say, I just started with Haulin Assets. Like it's significantly better than my last position. And you should look them up. And then you finish your meal, whatever, you move on. And then later that night, you're getting hit with ads for Haulin Assets. And you can make that happen for your positions. But now as far as like the logistics side, what actually do you need?
Yeah.
So you're going to need a Facebook page. You're going to need an Instagram page. Because again, people don't think Instagram is Facebook advertising, but it's the same back end.
Same platform.
Yep, exactly. You need what's called the Business Manager or the Meta Business Suite. This is where you tell Facebook, we are a business, you verify yourself and you connect your two pages, and you can assign roles and stuff. And then finally, you're going to need an Ads Manager account. And you're going to need to understand employment advertising policies, which is probably the most important one on that list, because if you don't follow the advertising policies, your whole page and everything can be shut down and you could waste thousands of dollars.
Like permanently shut down? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we've seen companies that they weren't even the ones that were, not following the policies, but somebody got access that wasn't supposed to, broke the policy once, their ads get pulled down. They submit for review. Facebook says, sorry, you didn't fix the changes. So they do what they thought, they tweak a couple of things, change their messaging, review again. Facebook says, sorry. They go through it a third time and then Facebook just says, sorry, you can't ban. And they're spending, $5 to $10,000 a month on advertising. And just because these policies are so sensitive for Facebook and Facebook feels there's potentially a lot of liability there if these policies aren't strict and people aren't, avoiding discrimination practices with their employment advertising. They're very sensitive about it, and you just have to stay on top of it constantly.
So this is one of those things. It's like when you, I don't know, buy a truck or get a mortgage or something. A lot of times you're going to skip the fine print. Don't skip the fine print in this case. Is that what you're saying? Is that fair?
Yes. No, because the fine print will come back and bite you. And again, it's cost me personally hours of headache. We've wasted money because even we'll meet with a Facebook specialist that we get assigned, they'll tell us we're okay, but because it's their AI bot that's reviewing all the ads, we'll get flagged again and have to get on the same phone call and be like, what the heck's going on? Like, how do we fix this?
Yeah.
So it really is a touchy subject that I can't, I know I'm going on here, but I can't stress enough how important those policies are.
Read the fine print, Chris.
Be careful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, one of the points that I wanted to make throughout this podcast is we, at Haulin Assets, before we got in touch with Jake, we'd actually had tried to do some Facebook advertising with another company that does Facebook advertising that they know that well. But the thing is driver recruiting, really specifically recruiting. And then on top of that, driver recruiting is so specific that Jake kind of knows what he's doing so well. And this is what they do, a niche within inside of a niche, that they just did a way better job. And we had a lot more success because, he knows how to do exactly this, recruit for drivers. Yeah. That's really all, like a big chunk, if not all of what you guys do, right?
That's all we focus on right now is driver recruiting, and Facebook ads specifically for driver recruiting.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got the tools in place. You're ready to start creating ads. The first thing I imagine you need to know is who you are targeting. You talked about geographic.
Yes.
I don't know what other demographic metrics you would use, but is there anything else in that area?
No. So the big thing is what type of driver can be hired. So you can't target based off of age, gender, interest as much.
Right.
So you have to know that this is a tanker position. This is a local position. What type of images can we use? But really what we'll do is we'll learn the type of position that we're hiring for. And from there, you can kind of create idea of who your target audience is within guidelines for the company that's hiring, and create a message that's made for who you think the best person is to fill this empty truck.
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying, you've got to paint with a pretty broad brush here. You're saying, we can't drill down based on, X protected class or whatever, right? Age or gender or whatever. But with that broad brush, then you're going to use the content itself, the ad itself, to kind of filter the people who are interested. And so that's interesting. So you were mentioning tanker positions or flatbeds or local or whatever. So even your imaging has to match that. Like you can't just put like some bikini clad model on there to attract interest and say, hey, come work for this company or whatever, right?
Or you're not going to put a tanker truck on an ad that you're hiring for a reefer driver.
Right. Okay. And does the AI bot that you're talking about flag that sort of thing?
So what will happen is the AI bot, and I should preface this, no one knows how this thing works. It's almost like a deity.
Even Facebook, let's be honest.
It's taken on a life of its own. But what will happen is if you're using photos of a flatbed truck, you're going to attract drivers that are flatbed drivers.
Right.
And who want that position. And then what Facebook does is it sees, okay, we got a bunch of responses from this demographic or who have this kind of use case profile on Facebook. They like these pages. They interact with this type of content. Let's show this ad to more people that are similar to them. And then so once you get a few flatbed drivers engaging with it, Facebook's going to know, okay, we have to show it to more flatbed drivers, but it's not categorizing them as flatbed drivers. It's saying this is their Facebook use case. Let's show it to more people like that.
So, I mean, back when I worked in marketing or digital marketing, we called it the almighty algorithm.
Yes.
And we capitalized that thing. You better believe it. The almighty algorithm. And so you're just saying it will figure it out.
Right.
Like it or not, it's going to figure it out. So don't try to outsmart the algorithm. Right.
But the key is to get that messaging correct.
Right.
So if you don't attract the right people to the ad, it's just going to spiral and show the ad to the wrong people.
Okay. All right. So then how do you go about, like I talked about the logistics of creating the account and getting ready to go on Facebook and Instagram, I should say. But then how do you create these ads? Do you need to go out and hire a professional for $10,000 an image to do a really great graphic design? I mean, how do people go about doing all this?
Right. So there's varying degrees, obviously. The first biggest piece of advice I can give people starting out is just grab photos of your trucks. Go out with your
own trucks.
Yes, because
They're not copyrighted.
Right. Yes, that, but also that tells a story to the drivers that you're trying to recruit. And regardless of the type of truck you have, using your photo of the truck is going to create a level of authenticity. And when the driver shows up for orientation in day one, they already know what they're in. There's no, if you use a stock image, there may be a level of, they're let down a little bit or they're just confused.
Right.
But so that's step one. Next.
I'll just put this out there. The images that we used are just pictures that Nate or I took.
Right.
So
I was just going to say, you mentioned stock images, Jake. People can sniff those out from a mile away.
Yes.
It's there's no there's no casual stock image.
Yes.
Such a thing does not exist.
Right.
So,
and then, so once you have the photos of your trucks, if this is your first time making paid ads, use Canva. Like, don't even mess around with Photoshop.
What's Canva?
Canva, they have a whole series of templates that you can go in. It shows you, like, here's what an Instagram ad would look like, and it makes sure your sizing is correct. It gives you good fonts and colors. You can upload your logo. It's software that's free to use, made for people who have never done graphic design to be able to graphic design ads.
Right.
And so if this is your first campaign, you're getting started, Canva is going to save you, hours of trying to figure out a new platform, because it's very user friendly. Now,
so I'll provide a link in the show notes to Canva, and then I'll also I'll provide one of our images that we've used so that people can kind of see an example of this is what we're using on our Facebook posts.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And then so now if you're going to get a little bit more technical with it, we use a lot of Photoshop and another platform called Figma. And again, this is so we can change the coloring, remove backgrounds, and you get a little bit more technical. But if you're starting out, use Canva. And then another big thing to remember when you're getting started is the sizing is really important.
Right.
And you may not think about that if this is your first campaign.
So it just needs to be a rectangle. I'll just make a rectangle. Great.
Right. But you have to make sure, right, that Instagram size is 1080 by 1080 pixels. Otherwise, it's going to be distorted. You're going to have words cut off. Your logo's going to be cut off. It's going to be either blown up or pixelated. And then as far as content, when you're going to create these ads, we try to keep it pretty simple. Use a photo of the truck, name the type of driver that you're trying to hire, if it's OTR, if it's local, and then kind of have maybe one or two highlights for the position and a call to action. You don't want to overload them with information, because what the goal is to actually kind of work them down the funnel so they're interested and they click to learn more.
Nobody knows what the funnel is, Jake. Nobody knows what the funnel is. So what you're saying is you're gathering interest from a lot of people and whittling it down to those who are possibly going to pull the trigger and call Chris. Is that right?
Bit. So yeah, so usually with the image and the content that you have, you're going to immediately filter out anybody who's, like, again, with the flatbed, right?
Right.
Flatbed drivers are responding to flatbed. So you're going to filter out people that are not qualified in that sense. And then, but if you only have 1 to 2 top, job offer, for the position, they might say, well, I'm curious to learn more. And so it's almost like you're whittling down the intent of becoming a driver to the point where once the recruiter or the person who calls them is speaking to them, they know pretty well, like, okay, this is a position I'm really interested in. This is a position I want to ask and learn more about and get to know the company. Or, you know what, I've seen the ad, I've seen the further information they sent my way. It's just not going to work out. And I can tell the recruiter no, and that recruiter can then move on to the next driver that's interested.
Right. Okay, cool. So we've got some concrete tips on how to create a campaign, but there's going to be a burning question for a lot of people out there. Hey, I need to recruit a bunch of drivers. I mean, apparently, if you are driving 10 trucks out on the road, Chris, you're going to need to recruit a lot of drivers constantly. So the next question is, how much is this going to cost me? Right. So do you guys have, I'm sure you have a sense of how much each campaign is costing you, but do you have a sense of how much it costs to find a driver? When all is said and done, you've hired somebody, here's how much it took for us to bring them through the door?
Yeah. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So my thoughts, one, it's not cheap, but hiring drivers anywhere is not cheap. And it's definitely less expensive than having a truck just sitting.
Right, yeah.
So when every time we do a new ad campaign, we usually, it's about $1,000 of paid advertising.
Yep.
And we can usually get somewhere between 1 and 3 drivers for each roughly $1,000 that we spend.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's very different. So if you guys were hiring teams, that number could double, right? Or if you had a more technical position, say it was a tanker doubles route, and you needed the person to come in with their endorsements. There's a lot less of those drivers. Those drivers are all higher paid, and it's going to take more to convince someone to switch from their current position to yours.
Right.
And so, right, Haulin Assets is doing great. They're hiring 1 to 3 drivers for every $1,000. However, if we just brought on a new team route, it may take $1,000 to hire one team, which I guess would be 2, right? Or it may take $2,000 to hire that team. There's a lot of moving parts from, where you can recruit from, what type of position this is.
So that's how much people are spending on Facebook. But let's get into the relationship you guys have, because Jake, you are not an employee of Haulin Assets, right? You're contracted to help find these drivers. So if we roll that cost in, I guess if somebody wants to go out and do it on their own, you can. It is possible.
Yes.
You talked about Canva and what was it? Figma.
There you go. Figma.
So there are tools out there to help people do this on their own. It's not an insurmountable mountain to climb. However, maybe your time is spent better elsewhere, right? And so if somebody wants to hire out to a company like yours, how much should they expect ballpark to pay for a service like what you do?
Yep. So like Chris said, we're running $1,000 month to month with Haulin Assets. We have companies that will pay us up to $14,000 a month. What we try to do is we take a consultative approach, and knowing how much it costs you to hire really changes. So the minimum is gonna be 1,000. That's if you need 1 to 3 drivers this month per month, I should say.
So that $1,000 that we pay includes
the
fee.
campaign.
Yeah, that's everything.
Okay.
Yep. And then, but if you need to hire 10 drivers, you have to pay up. You're gonna have to pay $5,000.
So right. Okay. So there's a fee that Chris is paying you, but then you're also folding in, here's how much it's actually going to cost on Facebook to run these ads and folding that in. So a bigger fleet, 20, 50, 100 trucks, they need to recruit more drivers. It's going to take more Facebook ads. And so the budget just gets bigger.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. All right. That gives me a good idea of the budgets here. What else do we want to talk about with this topic then? Where do these leads go? When somebody finds the ad, they see the ad on Facebook, are they then calling you, Jake, or are you sending them directly to Haulin Assets to talk to them? How does that work?
Yeah. So the way we set it up, we set up a series of web automations that grab that lead's information, and they're going to send it directly to Haulin Assets within seconds. So their recruiters can take over. But simultaneously, while that's happening,
Our recruiters, Nate.
Yeah. Nate's going to call him. But before Nate gets a chance to get on the phone with somebody, we've already sent a text message and an email from Haulin Assets for them. So by the time Nate calls, the driver's seen the ad on Facebook from the Haulin Assets page. They've seen a text and they've received an email from the Haulin Assets email. So Nate can call them. They know who Haulin Assets is, but they don't actually ever know who I am or Merrimack Solutions is.
Right. Okay. All right. So you're the man behind the curtain.
Yes.
We're trying hard not to pull the curtain back.
The Wizard of Oz.
Exactly. Okay, good. So if some of the stuff you've mentioned so far seems intimidating, people are talking, you're talking about pixel sizing and I don't know what else you said, KPIs and automated drip campaigns and this and that and the other. If that all sounds too intimidating, yes, there are companies out there that can help people do this, like yours. Okay, cool. So now we've got drivers. We've got a pipeline of drivers, Chris, that you've worked hard to build, and that's where we're at. And Jake, you've been a part of that for the last 6 months. Why don't you give everybody listening maybe just a few kind of key points of expertise, some best practices that they can keep in mind if they're going to build their own campaigns or ask another company about how they're building campaigns for them.
Yeah. So best practices specifically for Facebook advertising and recruiting, make the ads mobile friendly. I forget the statistic off the top of my head, but the majority of people interacting with your ads are going to see it on their smartphone.
Oh, it's like 80% for Instagram, or
I think it's
got to
even
be
higher.
90.
It might be higher.
90 for Instagram and 80 for Facebook.
Right.
Almost everybody on a cell phone.
Yeah.
Yes. So make it mobile friendly, and that seems like obvious, but when you're making the ads on the computer,
You don't
sometimes
think
you
about
forget
it.
about
Yeah.
it. Right. Next, you're going to want to combine images and videos in your ads. Now, videos can be a little misleading. That could be as simple as you animate the text sliding up, or
Right.
it kind of like, you know, comes
Just
up
movement.
on that.
You're just talking about
exactly. What that's going to do is it's going to grab people's attention in different ways. And as you may show one person the still image ad, no response, show them the animated version, and they're going to respond and become a lead. Next, have patience. This is a really important one that we've seen a lot with multiple clients, where you'll launch a campaign and you won't get any response for 3 days. And you'll be freaking out. You're like, you put in hours to make the ads, you research your target demographic, you went out and took pictures. Like, there's a lot of work. And in 3 days, you're seeing that budget get spent and nothing's happening.
Right.
But what's actually going on is the algorithm, the almighty algorithm that you mentioned, is learning who's the best people to target. How are we getting the most likely conversions? And so there's a learning curve that Facebook will go through in each campaign. And if you panic and make changes too soon, the algorithm has to go through the learning curve all over again.
Right.
So if you have 3 days with no response and you make a change too soon, you might be signing up for another 5 days with no response as it's learning and trying to figure it out. So be patient, write it out. You know, there's some metrics you can look at to see, are people engaging? And just, you know, really trust your gut that you put in the work up front to generate responses. After that, do whatever you can to increase the speed to contact. So this is after the Facebook lead comes in, but if you can call a driver within the first 5 minutes of that lead coming in, I think it's like 22 times more effective than if you call them within the first 30 minutes.
Really?
Yes.
So
Wow.
you're talking
Yeah.
about people who are voluntarily putting their info in, right? This
Right.
isn't because like with my Norway trip example, this isn't like, oh, I mentioned it to my wife and 5 minutes later I get a call
Right.
from a travel agent. That would freak me out.
Right.
But so you're talking about somebody actually put their info
Yes,
in and you
yes.
call them right away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're running a lead generation campaign. They fill out a short form with their name and some qualifying questions. And this is part of why we set up these automations to send them to Haulin assets as fast as possible. Is because we know that speed to contact is crucial. Because in that moment, the driver's thinking about you. They responded. Your company's on their mind. If you wait an hour, who knows? They could have, maybe they stopped and, you know, while they're getting a bite to eat, they filled the application out or the short form, and then they're on the road and you missed their chance to call them. Or 2 days later, they've been hit with, you know, they've seen 5 other Facebook ads from other carriers. They've been called by 4 different recruiters, and then you give them a call and
And they're like, who?
right. Exactly. So speed to contact is really essential. And then finally, Facebook ads are just a piece of the pie. I've met a few carriers where they think if we get a successful Facebook campaign, all of our recruiting problems are solved. But really, it's a long process to get somebody hired from, you know, the top of the funnel, right? You said no one knows the funnel, right? But getting people interested, to getting them to commit to send you their information, to fill out a full application, to go through orientation and training. And then once they're in the seat, you know, how do you keep them there and retain them? So don't think Facebook is going to be a cure-all. Like, once we begin advertising on Facebook, we're going to hire and never have turnover. And
Right.
you're still going to have empty trucks, but getting this piece of the pie right can help lift the rest of the recruiting process up.
Yeah. I mean, it's Chris, like I said, you've built a pipeline for hiring, and pipelines don't just have one point of entry, right? You're going to have to feed that thing at a few different places. So what about, as I'm thinking through best practices and ads and whatnot, like I said, I worked in digital marketing for a while, and I know that testimonials are huge.
Yes.
But if we're talking about an industry with nearly 100% turnover, is that feasible? Is that something you guys can do? Chris, is there like a sweet spot where you go to one of your drivers after like 4 to 6 months and be like, hey, how's it going? Are you enjoying it? Good. Give us a testimonial before you quit. Like, how does that go?
I mean, one, if you're not treating your drivers well, they're not going to want to give you a testimonial.
Right.
And, you know, our goal is, if the average turnover within the industry is 100%, we want to be at 50. You're never going to, like, you're never not going to have driver turnover.
Sure.
But if we can be half of what everybody else is.
I remember the DUI story. There's no 0%.
Nope, there's no 0%. Yeah. If you can do things that differentiate you and so that you can retain drivers better, then you're more likely to have drivers that are willing to give those kind of testimonials and, vouch for you. And then they also give, that's like another one of the piece of our recruiting pie is we give incentives to drivers who give referrals, and we get probably half of our drivers that way, half of our drivers through recruiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say too, I mean, if you're taking care of them, they're going to leave positive comments on your post or Google reviews.
Yeah.
it's not as formal, like, hey, we need a testimonial. Can you give that to us often? You're taking care of them. They'll do it on their own, which is pretty cool to see.
Okay, cool. Well, we're coming up on the end of our time, but I do want to give you a chance to then give us the other side of this coin. Those are best practices,
right?
Worst practices, things to avoid.
Yes.
Let's quick fire some of these.
Okay, so the first one is going to be failing to declare your ad as a special ad category. And so this goes back to those employment advertising policies. So
you're not selling jeans here.
No, yeah. So it's employment, housing, credit, and political ads. All are special ad categories to Facebook, and you actually have to check a box that says I have to follow stricter rules. If you don't check that box, even if you follow all the rules properly, your ads are done. They're going to take them down. You're going to get a slap on the wrist from Facebook. So that's number one. The second common mistake, forgetting that image sizing, having ads that are running that are
so nobody can tell what it is because they can only see one corner of it.
Exactly. And that's just such a silly one where when it happens, you think like, man, like we put in all that work and we got wasted effort because something so silly. Next common mistake. And
don't use the Air Force to advertise, right, Chris? As the jets are flying overhead, just want to remind everybody, don't build a podcast studio under an Air Force base flight path. There's your best practice for the day.
Do you think we could get them to have one of those streamers that airplanes carry?
But behind an F-16.
Yeah, we could just have them go down I-15 with all the trucks on it and advertise. That might be another pipeline. Another way to do it.
That banner is stock straight, baby. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I interrupted you, but so did the Jets.
I was going to say the Jet made me lose my thought for a second. It's all good. But the next one, using stock images. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but it's so simple to get a picture of your truck with your cell phone. Just do that. It's going to produce in the long run. After that, you can run your ads that aren't through the ads manager, but on the business manager. However, you don't get the same level of metrics and KPI indicators. So run the ads to the ads manager. And if you set that up at the beginning, it's just as easy.
Yeah.
And then finally, and this is another big one, but not staying up to date on policy changes implemented by Facebook. I can say I've been doing this for a little over 4 years now. And
so you've seen 16 giant changes?
Right, exactly. It's almost like every, even just last year, it was like new iOS feature is going to ruin targeting and Facebook ads are dead. And then they got rid of special ad audiences. Like there's always something coming up. So you just have to be aware and then you just kind of have a plan in place. If it is doomsday, how are we going to respond and stay ahead of this?
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, this is something that people can do on their own.
Yes.
It's going to take some research. It's going to take some reading. It's you're going to have to do your homework in order to do it on your own. So you can do it on your own, or you can hire a company like Jake's. Chris, we're putting a link in the show notes, right? So people can check out Jake and see what they do over there. Tell us the name of the company one more time.
Merrimex Solutions.
Merrimex Solutions. So go check that out if that's something that you're interested in as far as building your fleet. But yeah, it's not only something that everybody can do, Chris, but like we were kind of saying at the beginning, it's something everybody must do. This is not optional. If you want to be more than just an owner operator, you're going to have to work at recruiting.
You might with 2 or 3 trucks be able to recruit on your own, but even then it's going to be a little difficult. Mm-hmm. I think you get much bigger than that. You've got to
hire it out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully this has been helpful to anybody who is trying to grow that fleet. Jake, thank you so much
for having me.
Dispensing your wisdom, dropping it out of the bomb bay doors. I can't stop thinking about these jets. They're running their big exercises today, Chris. But yeah, thank you, Jake. And thanks to everybody for listening. Now, like I mentioned, Haulin Assets LLC, motorcarrierhq.com. Both of those places are places you can go, and I encourage you to do so. But before we leave, Chris, you've got an impact tip for us today.
I do, but I'm kind of wondering if maybe we should save it because it's been a little bit of a longer episode.
It's a long episode.
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll save it for another one.
Professional tease.
There you go.
I love it. Okay,
That's
Chris,
great.
you're the burlesque dancer of this podcast. You're just it's the art of the tease over here.
That's a bad image. Oh, come on.
I want pasties and a G-string next time you come to the studio.
Don't tempt me.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. And on that note, we'll see you next time